I'm not ambition driven. I tend to be more driven by what I like to do. And if I find the things that I like to do, you don't have to drive me. I'll drive myself. As a matter of fact, do not drive me. My name is Alison Nicholson. I'm Professor of Medical Microbiology from the University of the West Indies. I have been working in the Department of Microbiology for many years. And here I have actually found the things that I really like to do. I have subspecialized in antimicrobial resistance and in infection prevention and control. But of course, I'm not limited to those. It's just that I've taken a special shine to those and I've been doing some extra work in that area. I absolutely love my job, and it feels as if I have not worked a day because of how much I love what I do. And yes, my days are extremely long, so it has nothing to do with the length of time, because my days are extremely long, but they are so fulfilling and time consuming that I do feel sometimes that this is not work, because it is so interesting, and so many new aspects come and one thing leads to another. You feel like a detective at times, trying to find out something, not being able to stop until you figure out what is causing this patient's problem. How do you treat this patient? How do you manage this patient? And you're engaged with live persons. It's not just something on a bench, you know what I mean? So it does make what you do that more rewarding when you are able to recommend a treatment that works, the patient gets better, everybody is happy. So yay for microbe.
Where in Jamaica did you grow up before you became a doctor?
So I was born in St. James. I went to Montego Bay High School, and then I came to the University of the West Indies. I started out in natural sciences, then I got into medicine, and the rest is history. My mother and father were very supportive. My mother was a teacher, and typical of a teacher, she kind of drove us a little harder than she probably should have or needed to. But I look back now and I appreciate it. My father was very supportive, and he would temper her tendency to kind of overdrive. So the balance was there, and we're grateful for that. I am one of a family of 4, and I have very fond memories of my late brother and sister. My sister was Yvonne Solomon Nelson, who taught in the Bahamas for many years. She died there and preferred to be buried there. My brother is Clayton Solomon. Clayton Solomon was the director of in sports, and he was known to be active in all the sports in Jamaica. I think almost all of them. He was very active, and he's the kind of person who you saw on TV every night, because wherever there was some sporting activity, he was in charge, or he helped to bring it about. He loved what he did, and just like how I love what I'm doing, he loved what he did. And we're the 2 middle children, so we were very close to each other. He was my supportive big brother, and I was his adoring little sister. So when he passed, that was really very hard. And my younger brother now is Hugh Solomon, and he is no longer living in Jamaica. He is in the US. But we keep in constant contact. I have 3 children. Natalie is my oldest, Dania, and my last child is Theodore. So that's my family. My entering the field of microbiology, I have to think that this was probably God ordained, because I had no interest in microbiology. Sorry, Prof. King. I did not. Professor King was head of department at the time, and a very good head at that. But I was in private practice. I'd actually finished my career, my medical training rather, and I had gone to work in a number of clinics, rotated in different areas, and then decided to step out into private practice. And I must tell you, I enjoyed private practice tremendously. So to all my private patients who might be seeing me, I really enjoyed it. I remember going to work and thinking, this can't be work, because I was enjoying it so much. I'm enjoying myself. I enjoyed interacting with my patients, getting to meet the members of their family, becoming a member of their family, and just enjoying them. I mean, there were patients who told me at points that, look, doc, I just come to talk to you, and I don't have a problem. And I enjoyed talking to them too. So that was really good, and it lasted for about 8 years. So a practice now that was being shared by 2 persons became mine alone, and it was heavy. It was really heavy, and I do tend to give to my patients a lot. I would give them my telephone number so they could get me any time of day or night, and I personally didn't feel comfortable seeing them in the day and knowing that their situation could evolve in the night and then they wouldn't be able to contact me. Then if they went to a hospital, they'd have to start all over again. So I gave them my number in the day and in the night, but my heart was bigger than my ability to cope. So after a while, I really began to feel burnt out. And so I just made a decision that I would take a 6-month break from the practice and just go somewhere else where I'm not in charge and where I have a little bit more flexibility. So I came to the University Hospital. Microbiology was not my first choice, but circumstances led to my being here. And when I look back, I have to think that God played a hand in that, because while I was here, there was the Royal Microbiologist who came here, and he came with a colleague. So both of them were actually visiting microbiology for a limited period while I was here. But I think their emphasis on clinical microbiology influenced me a lot. Not to say that we didn't have clinical microbiology here before, but they were primarily clinical microbiologists. And when I saw that, I thought I could do that, because I would prefer the clinical microbiology more than I would probably enjoy the just straight laboratory microbiology. So their influence, it was Professor J.D. Williams and his colleague with him, Dr. Moosdeen, who later became Professor Moosdeen. And Professor Williams went back to England, but Professor Moosdeen stayed in Jamaica for about 3 years. And I basically was mentored a lot by her, by Professor King, by all the other consultants here in the department. And I felt that I really had found a niche in medical microbiology, or more aptly would be clinical microbiology, because I did prefer clinical microbiology to just straight laboratory microbiology, and the trajectory of my life just changed after that. And to be honest with you, I don't feel as if I don't feel like I am working because I'm enjoying what I do so much. It doesn't feel like work. It feels like work. If you get my drift.
No, how many years have you been here since that?
All right, that requires some counting. I did count it the other day, and it was probably about 30 years, could be more.
So now that you have become the head of the department, when you were being appointed, how did you feel? What was the reaction for that?
That's another story, but I had no interest in being head, absolutely none. I'm not ambition driven. I tend to be more driven by what I like to do. And if I find things that I like to do, you don't have to drive me. I'll drive myself. As a matter of fact, do not drive me because I'm very self-driven and self-motivated. So I don't need you to drive me. I need to find what I like, and then I'll do the driving. So I was functioning in the different areas, and when the post of head came up, I had no interest. I showed no interest. I actually said to persons who asked me that I wasn't interested. But in spite of that, the post was offered to me. And I remember thinking to myself, if it is placed on my plate, I will take it. But I'm not going to make one step towards asking for it or doing anything. And it was placed on my plate, so I took it.
And it was placed on your plate just before COVID.
Right. It's something that is rotated. You don't stay head forever. You have 3-year terms. And so I did 2 terms, and you have a term limit. 2 terms, you can go on a little further, but you can't do 3 terms, right? So I did 6 years, and at the end of the 2 terms, I said, this is it. COVID took everything out of me. So at the end of 2 terms, I wanted no more. This was fine. I felt I had made my contribution in that area, and it was time to go back to some of the things that I was doing. I actually did enjoy the headship, I must say, in the sense that it exposed me to another area. It's more management, and you have to learn some of those things as you go along. But even though I enjoyed doing what I was doing from that perspective, when 6 years came, I knew that that was it. So even though I was offered the opportunity to continue, I told them not one day past the 6 years, not one day, and I meant it. After the headship, I wasn't at retirement yet. And so I continued in my other role. Retirement came, and I was asked to do a particular area, and I'm fine. I was fine with that. And I think that I've finished most of my goals. As I told you, I'm in an area that is relatively new now. So that is like when I say relatively new, the area has always existed, but it has been underdeveloped. I took an interest in it some years ago, but doing other things prevented me from focusing on it solely. So now that I can pay it more attention, I'm trying to bring it in line with international standards. And I'm enjoying it. Whatever I do, I try not to bite more than I can chew. And the things that I take on, I like to leave a mark. And so the area that I'm in now, I'm hoping to leave a mark by the time I'm finished, which will be soon. And then I'll be fine. I mean, I'm not going to be looking around for things to do just to keep me occupied. I think I can find a lot of those in other areas. But just to say that it's very difficult for me to think that 30 years have passed, because it's almost like, it's not like work. If you understand what I mean, I would hate to have passed this time sitting behind a desk and probably doing something that I don't like. I cannot say that. The diversity that I face here, the challenges that come up, the curveballs that life throws in terms of the infections that we see that we never expected, the COVIDs that required a completely new cap that I had to wear at that point in time, not just for the lab, not just for the university hospital now, but for the nation. So yeah, it meant a lot of late nights, a lot of challenges, but we got through by the grace of God, as I've said before. And it really does not feel like I've worked, if you understand what I mean. On the one hand, yes, I'm tired, and yes, my body is saying you need some rest and you need some relaxation. But on the other hand is, wow, that was a breeze. I mean, I went through 30 years and it just feels like a day or two. Yeah, all right, okay, calm down. You do need some rest, go rest. COVID really was the greatest trial I've ever been through in my career as a medical microbiologist. And I don't think anything can equal that. It was extremely demanding, and it was under very trying circumstances. So basically you had the panic with persons being scared of this COVID that was killing people, let's face facts. So you can understand why people were scared. But at the same time, we had other issues to deal with. So for example, the supply of reagents was very sketchy. So we would try to get supplies. We were working in conjunction with our company here who supplies reagents to us, and that company had to line up behind some of the bigger countries in the countries where the reagents were sold. Fortunately, they did have links, and so they tried their best. But the nail-biting impact of having to wait on reagents to enter the island, knowing that you have a large batch of tests, knowing that when the reagents come, they might not be enough, knowing that there are persons who decisions are being made based on whether they are COVID positive or negative, family situation, family wants to know, is this person positive or negative? It was a tremendous trial. Remember too that the mortality rate was there for you to contend with. It's not like something that was just passing through. People were dying from COVID across the world, so that led to the panic. It was then having persons who were willing to work with COVID, especially in the laboratory situation. You're going to be rubbing shoulders with this virus. So you have to be bold, and you have to be fearless, and you have to keep calm. So fortunately for us, we did have workers like that, workers who up to today, I have tremendous respect for them. And of course, I must mention Professor Monica Smytle, who is actually, she's a microbiologist, but her subspecialty is immunology. But she does just as well in virology. And so for a while, she took the helm looking at COVID, testing for COVID. And I want to tell you that she turned up here during COVID every single day, whether it was Saturday, Sunday, rain, shine, public holiday or not, she was here. The team was rotated, so you had different technologists, a small team, very small team, so they did yeoman service for the country. And so Professor Michael turned up. I was here also to monitor what was happening, because whenever there was an issue, I would be the person that would be called, depending on the area. So depending on what was happening, if it was probably the hospital, I would be called to find out what is happening with this test or that test, what is happening with the reagents, etc., etc. We had to work closely with the Ministry of Health during that time, because we were testing for the entire country. And it was a new test, so that took some doing to get accustomed to what needed to be done. But as I said before, Professor Michael took care of that along with her team. And I, being head of department, had to go in and out and basically moderate how we test for the hospital, prioritizing the hospital, of course, and making sure that we also do due diligence to the country by working hand in hand with the Ministry of Health. When we heard about COVID, the reflex reaction would be to panic. But when you think more logically about it, how it spread, what are its effects and so on, then your response would become a bit more tempered. However, we had a number of logistical things to overcome. So for example, reagents. We're a third world country. We're not going to get reagents easily. The first world countries will walk over you to get their reagents. And so we worked hand in hand with a particular company that usually supplies us with our reagents. And we could always call on them and ask them to see, try and do their best. But even with that, there were times when we were running short on reagent. There were times when, the reagent was about to finish and we had a whole pile of samples to test and we had no idea when we'd get reagents again. So that was for me, as a head of department, I would have to be looking into that a little bit more. And it was really very challenging. And there was actually a time when we had run out of reagents and we had about 200 samples to test. And a lot of those samples belonged to our colleagues and other persons at this hospital as well. And tension was really running high. Persons were very unhappy that their samples weren't tested, not understanding that it was completely out of our control. And I think it was probably by divine intervention that we were able to find a source of 200 tests on a cold, rainy night when nobody was supposed to be walking around. We had to drive to the place where we knew the source was. And I, along with a resident of mine, Dr. Jerome Walker, and we were able to pick up the reagents, come back up here in the night, and the technologists were still here waiting, and they were able to test, of course, that probably batch never finished until midnight or something like that, but we were able to send out the results. So things like that are really nerve-wracking, because people are, really want to know their results, and so much depends on if you're positive, you go into that bed. If you're being admitted to hospital, if you're negative, you go into that bed. So it's important to know whether you're positive or negative before you're placed on the ward. So it's not just the personal anxiety, but it also has to do with how you manage patients and how you manage the beds that you have in the hospital. So that was a major difficulty for us, and I think it was a major difficulty worldwide, because they were having far fewer tests than was needed. And it wasn't until way down when there was a breakthrough that they started manufacturing tests in the quantities that we needed when other countries came aboard and so on.
Looking back, would you have wanted yourself to be in the same position again, in charge of a whole department?
Absolutely not. That's a once in a lifetime thing, and I can look back and I can say, thank God we did it. Thank God. The late nights, the panic, the anxiety, the struggles of trying to get the funds. We had to get additional machines. We got additional machines, and we had partnership too. I should mention that we did have private sector partnership. Mr. Chris Zaka, for example, representing other persons, I'm sure, but he partnered with us, came forward and asked how could they help, and they did help. They helped us with equipment, and we're willing to help further. So that was a big help when we saw corporate Jamaica stepping forward and coming to our rescue to help us. And it also made you feel supported, as if not everybody was saying, oh, the results weren't ready, but some persons were actually saying, how can we help? What can we do?